The question in my mind is, how do you create or relaunch a highly profitable and successful 6 to 7 figure business? With so much conflicting advice about the best ways to start and grow your business, how do you get it right the first time? I want to help entrepreneurs make a real difference and navigate the messy world of startup or relaunch. My name is John North, and this is the Startup Secrets for Entrepreneur Show. Join me today when we dig deep with our guests and get you the best blueprint so you can fast track your own business. This episode is sponsored by Evolvepreneur.app, your all-in-one online business system. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at StartupSecrets.show right now. So let's get into today's episode.
Hi, I'm Ben Leyrolf. Been on this week on Evolvepreneur with John. We spoke about turning your business into an asset. So we talked about creating systems. We talked a little bit about Elon Musk. We talked about some of the mistakes that you can make in business that means your business can be really hard to sell. So yeah, hopefully you get something good from our chat.
You're listening to Evolvepreneur Secrets Show for Entrepreneurs, and I'm your host, John North. And today I've got a very special guest, Ben Leyrolf. I'm pretty close to explain. I'm pretty bad with people's names, so it's like that's not too bad.
It's a bit of a tricky one. You're right.
Yeah, so I've had worse. So my mission is to help startup entrepreneurs, navigate the messy world of getting started in business and growing business, and often the pivot as well. So when people want to pivot to another something, so we talk to a lot of different guests about a lot of different things. And so today we're kind of digging deep on a new business that Ben's created, and welcome Ben to the show.
Great, thanks for having me.
And I'm just going to dig into your bio a little bit. So you spent 15 years as a business owner and entrepreneur, working with some of Australia's most iconic purpose-driven organisations. That's interesting. And you're founder of Impact Positive, which is helping business owners turn their business into assets and staging them for sale. So that's a very topical thing, and I think I mentioned to you before. I'm actually talking to someone yesterday about that whole thing. So I'm already primed for that.
Fantastic.
So welcome. So tell me, what were you doing for 15 years? And you said you were doing it for purpose-driven organisations. So what were you doing in that period of time? How did you get to that?
Yeah, so look, I'm a bit of a tragic for starting a business. My dad, he ran a small business basically his whole career, and so I've gone and followed in those footsteps. And look, some of them have been successful, some of them haven't been that successful. But generally the theme or the thematic around is that they're products that help purpose-driven organizations, which is, generally speaking, it's social enterprises, it's non-for-profits, it's government departments, it's kind of any kind of business that their primary goal is about, I guess, making the world better or having some kind of positive impact. And then the financial motive is the thing that follows behind that, right? It's very important to have something that is stable and solid and has money. Like, all of those things are important, but it's not necessarily what is driving people.
And it's quite interesting actually, because I did some work with some people for Fortune Institute a long time ago, and one of the things that they did is they did this, like, I think 6 or I can't remember the list how many there are, but 6 different things for businesses, and one of the top ones was a bigger mission than money. And I think that's a big thing for any business, is that if you're just money focused, then that's the sort of customers you attract, as well as the fact that there's no real, to get out of make more money, it doesn't necessarily really motivate people. Ultimately, money is a fairly short-term motivator. So,
yeah, that's 100% right. And I think what you are right about there, or what you hit on, is that it's a bad motivator. It's like not great leverage. So it's not the message of you shouldn't go out and make money because money is bad. It's like just going out with the idea of just making money is a pretty difficult thing to do. You need to have some higher purpose that people can rally around, you can build brand equity around, you can hire staff around. Like, that's the thing that's important. And then money is the oxygen of the business.
And it's quite interesting. I look at, like, Elon Musk with the whole Twitter thing, right? Fires everybody by email and restarts the computers. Like, it seems like a really draconian way to treat people. Like, to me, it's like really bad. But then he turns around and says, this is the sort of person who's got to work for me. And it's like, whoa, most people wouldn't do that, right? And, like, apparently he's been accused now of having bedrooms set up in Twitter and the local San Francisco's putting these writs against him and stuff about letting people sleep at work. And
Yeah.
it's a whole different mindset, right? But he's going to attract the sort of people that are like that. And so what he's basically done in some respects is he just jettisoned everybody who's not going to fit his model, and he's attracting the people he wants to. It's a pretty rough way to do it, but then I guess he's got a time limit there, a lot of big bill to pay. But it's sort of interesting when you look at that. But you can see the mission's not money, right? He needs money to run the thing, but you can tell it's not about the money. It's about something else. And so I think that's really what he'll get people to buy into that, regardless of people go, well, but I like that. I want to do that. I want to, you probably end up with cancer in 6 months' time or something. But at the end of the day, like you'll work that way because you attract the right sort of employees. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing. I mean, it's a great study to me in terms of mission. And yeah,
certainly you can see where he's been the most successful is when he's rallying people around something. So like Tesla or SpaceX, which is arguably where he's done his best work, is he attracts people who are willing to work hard, and you can get a market cap that's way more, like I think it's like the 3 car companies, like the next 3 combined still don't hit a market cap.
And you know what he said that I think 100 years it's been since a car company actually survived. So this is the only car company that actually got launched and actually survived the launch and actually produced cars in 100 years.
Yeah,
so it's a significant achievement when you think about it. And in the SpaceX is changing the way it's done things, but he's also very good at getting that thing done fast, right? It's almost like there's no, there's a deadline, there's a schedule, like you got to get it done twice as fast and stuff like that. And that's the people that change the world, and I guess that's what the people get attracted to, because they get part of that story. You get part of history. So that his mission is kind of like you're going to be part of history. You probably end up in the history books if you're good at what you do. So it's kind of bizarre when you think about it. But and I think that's the thing about it, and it probably fits in nicely what we're talking about is if you have a business asset. And I think interesting enough, I was at a conference a few years ago, and they kept talking about, and this was an internet digital marketer conference, which you may have gone to maybe, and they kept on talking about properties in relation to websites, and I thought I got it out of the gate. Thinking, I see what you're saying here, but you can see the audience being Australian looking and going, what are you talking about? I can't see any house there, right? It's like, and it's like, but you're not valuing. And they say, we've got these $100 million properties. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Is it like a resort or something? No, it's a website. And so I think the valuation of assets in business is wrong. You don't value the right things in business. And actually I had a good conversation with the guy yesterday about brand awareness and brand equity and what people value in terms of that name. And the concept of saying, well, hang on, there's more assets in your business you think you've got, and you're not necessarily leveraging them. And then when you go to sell it, you end up in a situation where you can't sell it or you sell it for less than you thought because you didn't think about your brand. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a lot of intangible assets in your business that if you can harness them, right, if you can package them up as something that you could pass on to somebody else, you'll, double, triple, quadruple what you could ask for the business. And I think what one of the really good things about kind of preparing your business to sell, even if you don't want to sell it, right? You've started this business, you want to work on it, you never want to sell it, like that's the dream. Packaging it up as something that you can sell means that you've actually got a level of freedom from your business. It's something that could run without you, which means you can take more holidays, you can, take parental leave if you need it. Like there's just a lot more options.
Because life does happen, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. Like I was running I think about 2016 or something, I found out I had bowel cancer. So on the Monday, right? And so I basically, a Wednesday operation, Thursday was out and it was never happened. It looks like it never happened. And so the thing was though, if my business couldn't run without me during that period of time, and you don't, and it really brings it home, because what happened at that point is I was working longer hours, I was working a lot more, and I came to the conclusion that it's not 8 days in a week. So you can't work 7 days a week and expect a result. If you can't work 5 days a week and get a result, you're certainly not going to work 7 days a week and get a result. You're just going to be tired and sick. And so getting that compressing that down and thinking, okay, well, in my opinion, no one pays you money after 5 o'clock in a normal business, in business.
Mm-hmm.
So why should
Yeah.
we talk to people after 5 o'clock? Because they're not going to give you money, right? So then just setting
Yeah.
up timescales and say, okay, I can get more done, and you get so much more done before holidays anyway. I'll get more done in less time. How can I do it the most, not necessarily the laziest way? How can I get this
Mm-hmm.
done? And that's the mindset, isn't it? Like if you're looking and thinking, well, if I keep working really hard, your parents tell you to do, which is probably the worst thing they could have ever told you, I reckon,
Yeah.
is that you end up in a situation where you just worked yourself into an early grave, and then the business that you wanted to build for life isn't available to you because you're the business, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary bit, and I think that's that mindset of, as you say, like thinking about even if you're making it for sale and you're not, it makes a very big mind shift because it gets you can't get off the hook, can you? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you talk, like what's the biggest kind of disaster story you've ever seen in terms of businesses? And I know you've only kind of started in the last 6 months, but what do you see the biggest sort of pitfalls they get into, and they convince themselves that it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you one from my own experience, which is a previous company. It was a consultancy that I co-founded. Um, from all metrics, looking around the business when we were in the business, it seemed like it was just a great business to be in. Like we were making great revenue, we were making pretty reasonable profit, we had a staff, we had like really good clients, like tick, 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 all the way down. And then, as you say, like life happens. And then the three founders are like, okay, well, how could we like exit this business? How could we sell it? What does the end game look like? And we went to our accountant to start helping us value this business. And just bluntly, they were like, it's not worth anything. Like and it's like just shock horror. Like how could we're so successful by all of these kind of vanity metrics, how can it not be worth anything? And then as we start to go down, it's like it's just solely dependent on us as people, right? We didn't have the right systems in place. We didn't have training or onboarding. Our clients were all relationship based. We didn't necessarily have a strong, repeatable funnel
Stuff
or
that they
lead
thought was good
mechanism.
were actually risks.
All risks. And then so we like had that moment where you're like, okay, well, let's turn the ship around. Let's start building value into this business and start scaling it up. And what we realized is that because we didn't necessarily have the foundations in place when we started, it was very difficult to start taking what was quite a creative business that was built on our personalities and then turn that into something that was more of a product, something that we could package up. And then scaling it became a problem as well, because the more people we got, the more clients we got, the more of our time we needed. And so it just put this like hard cap on like how big we could get. And so, yeah, that experience really, it was a hard lesson to learn around when you're starting a business where you've got to focus what's important. And it's not necessarily a revenue number so much as it is an asset valuation, or it's the systems and processes that you have.
And I think the danger is to say, like, you get in that situation where most people try and sell a business, and I did this years ago, where you try to sell a business at the worst possible time, because most people don't say, like when you build a house and you're going to sell it, then there's a time frame, and it's like you can see it. But when you've been in business, it's not like that, is it? Like it's like a big sort of jigsaw puzzle that keeps falling apart sometimes. And
100%.
Yeah, and I had a business that basically was turning over $1.5 million reoccurring. All we had to do was show up. But because I hadn't thought about selling it, and then I had to try and figure out how to present that, and because it was very early in the piece that people didn't understand reoccurring income and all that sort of stuff, I couldn't convince anybody in quick enough to be able to tell them to sell this $1.5 million business, which I basically just closed. And I think we had this conversation about before. Business failure isn't necessarily, I failed and the bank took my house. No. But, the failure is that you just couldn't sell it, because you didn't set it up for sale in the first place. Maybe you tried to sell it desperately. I mean, I had something the other day, tried to present a business to me, and I go, looking at your business, you've got no business plan, no brand really. At the same time, you've got a lot of recurring customers, and I could easily replicate your business in a week. Like I could just take what you've just done and I could build a new business for nothing. And I think that's the question. Could you replicate that business in a month or so? And if you can, you're in big trouble, right?
Yeah. Completely. And that's when we were talking about intangible assets before. But if you've got like a strong website with good traffic and say a good Instagram presence,
Yep.
that's something that can't necessarily be replicated overnight. That's something that you have to invest money in to get. And so being able to tangibly say, well, like that's a brand asset, fantastic, great. Like that's something that can go on the asset side of the ledger. Yeah.
Do you want simple and effective ways to get started that don't cost a fortune in time and money? Discover the best steps for each strategy we teach and the most important areas to focus on, and even to connect with your best customers and grow an online community. Grab your free copy of Startup Secrets for Entrepreneurs at startupsecrets.show. Yeah, I think that's I think they value the wrong things, and I think to a degree it is like you call vanity. Like you look at, oh, this is the numbers I'm making, but you're making them purely from personality or for personal hard work, and if you're not in that business. I think it's a good saying is if you left a business on holidays for 6 months and came back and it was better than you left it, then you got a business.
Well, that means you're building a business as opposed to like working in a business or running the business, right? Like your job is to make a thing that improves, right? That can like self-sustain. It's like that's the job of the owner.
And I think one of the things that I've done over the years, which is like I did it the other day actually. I wait for an employee, I set a situation up, and then let them fail. So I actually don't help them. Like know that it's gonna, and obviously it's a bit of a controlled environment where it's going to be okay. Not a big client that I'm just about to lose. But what I've done is I've just let it go and just wait to see what happens. And then afterwards I said, you know what I did? I waited to see what you would do, and you didn't do anything for 7 days. I said, so therefore there's a problem. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes you got to prepare to let the actual, it's like kids, right? You got to let them fall. And I think sometimes you got to let that thing fall to prove a point, because because you keep catching them, they never learn the lesson. They never get the bruised knees. And I think
and what you've uncovered there is like, it's not their problem. It's your, like, that's a problem for you.
Yes,
if they don't do anything in 7 days, then like that's, they're still going to take their paycheck.
And that came back to task management. So what happened was, the fundamental problem there was that they weren't using the task system to their advantage. I said, you're not using it to know what's going on, so you have no clue what's going on. So you did that job, and then you're relying on your memory, which is, most people's memory is not very good, to actually remember to do it. I said, but if you just use the system as it's set up, you wouldn't have had that problem, and someone else would have known what was going on as well. And that comes back to that IP, that comes back to that system process. Well, that obviously is a hole in the business there that could easily go pear-shaped if everybody didn't do that, and then suddenly nothing got done, and then people, what are they doing? Reversing credit card transactions, they're complaining, they're talking bad about you, and the whole thing escalates, all because this little simple thing you didn't fix.
Completely, absolutely. And it also shows another, I guess, common failure in business, which is, I guess what prompts me to think of this is you said things get stored in people's heads, and like, even if you do, have a great memory, which I do not, often you go into a business and all of this knowledge that's been learned through experience is trapped in people's heads.
Yes.
Right? Like there isn't actually an asset around people learning a thing, so then it's documented and shareable. It's like that person leaves huge amount, like there's no amount of handover that can take everything that person
and half the time you get
the
outgoing person to teach the incoming person, which is probably the worst thing you can ever do, because they will just impact on, if they're negative about leaving, they're going to completely destroy that new person on the way through. And I've seen it happen. That's why we never do it. We never used to do it anymore. Like, no way we ever take. So I'll stay and train your staff member. It's never worked out for me ever. It's always worked out badly. They're good intentions. Might be good intentions, but they just completely screw you on the way out, because they are leaving and they don't really care, and they've put that onto that new employee. But
they could have the best intentions in the world, right? They could be the best trainer in the world.
Yep.
They quit. You've got 4 weeks. You hired someone, best case scenario, with like a week to 2 weeks to go. Yes. You just cannot teach someone how to do a role in a week. And that's in the best possible circumstance. Let alone, someone's pretty demotivated by the end. They're figuring out what's next.
Bad habits too. Like they'll pass on the bad habits of that previous person. The interesting thing I've always found is trouble with, and I kind of think I've figured it out, but when staff won't write procedures, because then they think they don't need them. So what will happen is when they leave, they'll be easy to fire. So when you say, "Oh, can you write the procedure for this?" mysteriously never happens, right? Because it's like they're scared they're going to lose their job, right? So number one, it's like, oh, well, so kind of, to me, it's like create that procedures culture. But what I've always done is kind of documented it basically, got them to do it, and then improve the documentation and show me you can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that mindset of thinking about, slowly building, so, I'm going to document my whole business and get all excited for about a week, and then it never happens. And so it's like, oh, it sounded a good idea, but I just can't do it. But that slow little progressive, every time something goes wrong, write a procedure for it. And I think that's probably a good place to start. But I think the whole idea of writing these really detailed procedures don't really work because no one follows them. And so
yeah, no one wants to write them. No one wants to follow them. Least of all, like, I don't know about you, but least of all me.
yeah.
Like you have this whole idea about like, oh, there's this process. You're like, I'm not going to follow it. But that being said, I think we're talking about, I guess, creating assets around process and systems. And I think that what's important is not necessarily the steps in the process, like what is, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. I think what's actually important is, well, what is the function trying to do? Say it's like, it's hiring. Okay, well, in hiring, having a checklist, which is like every time we do hiring, we need to make sure we do this, we need to make sure we do this, usually attached with because last time we didn't do that and it failed for X reason.
Exactly.
So you got that checklist.
Writing and this it failed last time.
Yeah, totally. And it's just a cheat sheet, right? And so if you think of it as like a cheat sheet rather than a process, I think people often latch on to that idea much more because you don't feel, a process feels like you're being controlled, whereas a checklist is, you fill out a checklist every time you tick one of those things, you just feel a bit like, oh, yeah, I did like something. That's fantastic.
Right? Yeah, and I think that's right. And when we had my other business, when we were doing Sage Accounting, a lot of the stuff we did wasn't necessarily, if they didn't understand what they were doing, that was a problem in itself. But just making sure that when you packaged, in the old days, when you actually sent out a box and everything, to actually do that whole process and make sure you put everything in the box you're supposed to put in the box and all that sort of process and pack it and stuff like that. We had a checklist. And we always had, our checklist was always at one colour, because back in the days with paper. And so we always had they were a different colour, like they were a yellow, I think, from memory, because you could spot them a mile off. And so you knew that was a checklist. And I think that's the thing, is that if you build those, at least start with checklists is a good place to start, because then things don't get stuffed up. Like when I relaunched this show the other day, I thought there's a couple of steps in here that I keep forgetting to do because it's a bit elaborate. So I went and wrote myself a checklist. But then you just fill it in afterwards. Like next time I do it, I'll go, okay, I'll remember that now. I'll get someone else to do that because it's not that hard. Yeah. But it took a bit of work to get there. And I think, that documentation. One of the things I ever did was I started a journal, and everything I thought about write in this journal. And every time I went to conferences, I took the journal with me. So it became almost like, in some respects, writing the history of your business. And then I'll probably stop doing that. But I think it's a good thing to do. Like you're actually just writing down what happened as you go in, and you go back and go, oh, I remember that now, but I didn't remember the detail of where it went wrong or, where it went right. And that kind of, it was almost like you've got almost a duty to document your history of your business.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And actually, I just read this really good book a few months ago now called The Checklist Manifesto.
All right.
I'm not sure if you've heard it. It's very good. Would highly recommend. But basically what they talk about is that, surgeons, rocket scientists, pilots, and then mega city construction, like you do with those mega building construction projects, all run on checklists. Like they're too complex for process.
The pilot to have ticked off the list right before it takes off, right?
Yeah, 100%. You're like super smart, highly well trained, super motivated, very cool jobs, still running on something that is, 6 things on a checklist. Like that's it. And that kind of blew my mind, I'm like, I work in technology. I should have some sophisticated AI-based thing. And you're like, you don't really need that. You just need to have something pretty simple.
Yeah, I think the best sale I've ever had was the weakest link in your business is really where it's at. Like at the end of the day, that weakest link is always, not your strongest link is going to be your asset, your weakest link in your business, whether that's an employee or whether it's a process or whether that's something, but that weak link will be the rot that will set in, and then you'll end up, it'll cost you money and time. Both.
Yeah, and I love that. And you'll only ever have one at a time. like there is by definition only ever one weakest link. And so as like a small business owner, it can be overwhelming to think, oh, there's like 1,000 things that I should fix here.
Yes.
But actually, there's actually one thing that you need to fix right now. And when that's fixed, then there's just one other thing. And you just need to like find and identify those.
And the really thing I like about small business, and you got a reasonable, like I think when you hit about, I think the number was 23 employees, the world changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that out because I had 15 and then went to 23 and the whole world changed. Like it's just, your business is completely different. But the really nice thing about a smaller business is that you can change things quickly. And people think that's, oh, that's okay. But the reality is big business can't do that. They can't move that huge Titanic thing and change direction easily. And so they're a sitting target for small business that can actually be more nimble and be, actually do the job and do a good job of it. And I think that's what you've got to remember is that those big businesses cannot pivot and change easily. And I mean, Google's a great example of that. I mean, if you look down, you can Google this. I think I know even Google's failed businesses. So everything.
The Google graveyard. Yeah,
the Google graveyard. Like if you shut down, if you actually all the businesses Google shut down, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And you go, Google Plus was a failure. We only got 600 million users. It's like, what? That's a failure?
Yeah.
Like even LinkedIn doesn't have that many users, I don't think. And so it's like their definition of failure, right? And I think that's the thing too, is sometimes it's not what you think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why you see big companies like Apple, Amazon, like getting into things like healthcare. Because like the pressure on those businesses is that they need to put on multiple billions of dollars per year.
Yes.
And there's only so many markets that can support someone coming into it and making billions of dollars at that kind of scale. And that's where I think small business, totally agree with you, have the upper hand because you can pick something, especially when you think about purpose-driven organizations, right? Like you can pick a small community of people and make a big difference in their lives without having to have Google scale.
Yeah. And I think that's a myth, I think, in some respects that, do you really want what you want? Like because I've been through that whole 23 staff thing and I don't want that, honestly. Like, as you get older, you realize that that's not something you want every day. And so I think at the end of the day, you've got to look at that and go, what do you really want? And do you want to create a monster or not? Once you get past that staffing, so thinking about automation, thinking about the way what you want out of that business as well, I think is important because, like you said, like most people think they don't have a job for life anymore, right? Or business for life. You may jump around a lot. And I think that's the thing is like you don't think that that's going to be it. So a lot of thought that I think you don't do. And one of the things that I used to try and do in business was every so often book a holiday, even if it's one day, and get away.
Yeah.
And the amount of stuff that I used to think on a plane, because I had nothing else, because back, like now you can sort of have an internet on a plane, which I think was probably a bad idea.
I totally agree.
I think it's like I want to switch off and think. And I think that thinking time, a guy I met a few years ago said, look, I spend one day a month just thinking. I just get in my office and I don't do anything, just think. And I think that a lot of people don't do that. Like they just keep doing, but they're not stopping and hang on a minute, let's have a think about this. And
so I think about it as like eating your vegetables as a business, and like you've got to you've got to like take time to think. You've got to get space from your business to have some perspective. You've got to create processes, whatever they are. There's always a pretty good excuse to not do them today. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And it just never happens. And you end up with this company that doesn't actually have any of that strength, resiliency, fitness that it could have had because you just put off all of these habits that
you just got fat.
Were good, but you
just got fat.
100%. There's so many businesses that, because look, most business owners you talk to and you say something about like systems, process, perspective, planning, strategy, listening to a customer.
By then, they've both gone.
Yeah. Look, they'll tell you they're all good things. And you ask them, when was the last time you did it? And you're like, well, I haven't had time. You're like, well, there's a paradox there, right? There are things that are really important, but you're not doing them. How do we solve that problem?
One of the things that I find that happens a lot, and I call it to a degree, it's pretty shiny syndrome, but it's also what happens is people have too many products, they have too many solutions and too many things for a size of their business, and they're trying to manage them all. And I'll do that myself. I'm guilty of it. So what you're doing is you're having a stab at something. So you're doing something, seeing how it goes. and then you've established this product or service, but you didn't spend enough time on it. As soon as it doesn't work, you just ditch it and do something else. And I think that's the tricky bit, because I think a lot of times it's your cash cows you got to focus on. And you look at some of these really hyper successful businesses like Google to a degree, Uber, all these guys don't do one thing, and I think that's the thing. You look at that big business and they've got all those people and they just do one thing. And I think maybe it's because small entrepreneurs get bored. They couldn't just do one thing. You couldn't just keep flipping that burger. You got, other stuff. So do you find that happens a lot, where people kind of like their business is good, but what they've done is they've overcomplexed it. They've added too many things into it.
Yeah, I think that's super common. And I think you're right in that there's probably multiple reasons why it happens. It's a symptom of a few underlying causes, one of which people get bored. And I'm certainly susceptible to that. You're like, you have an idea and you're like, great, like, let's run with it. I think another reason that happens, especially in like service businesses, so if someone's running like a marketing agency or a consultancy or something like that, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to where they're like, oh, we're trying to create a product business, but to make money in the short term, we're going to be a services business.
Yes.
And they get stuck in this weird middle where the money is coming in for services.
Yeah.
They want to do product or 2 products or 5 products, and they never actually got to a critical mass to be able to pivot from one to the other. And then you end up talking to businesses and they're just like, oh, so what do you do? And they do this and they do this and they do this. When the reality is they're actually just doing services, and everything else is a thing that they wish.
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
It's a hobby.
And I've made that mistake.
So how do you think you get out of that? Like, do you have to basically essentially sack up and stop the services and cut the cord, or what do you do?
I wish I had a better answer. In my experience, I haven't seen anyone start and then transition in a way that didn't require a hard call, which was, we're going to significantly either decrease or defocus or say no to services revenue to take the leap into a product. I think that's the only way to go about it.
So I've seen like a lot of SaaS businesses, startups, and what they do is they lose a lot of money, that they've got a runway. And so they go, we've got enough money to last us for this period of time. And I think build up that war chest and then go, okay, now we're going to pivot out and we're going to do this. And maybe you start a whole new business. In most cases, like for me with my business, I split my business down the middle. And whilst most people, there's some people work in one business and work in the other because it's very different business. But the idea is that they're totally defined in two angles, because at the end of the day, you've got to think differently about that business. Yep. So between a SaaS business and a published business, one's a services business and one's a software business, you can't put them together. That's too hard, right? They confuse the crap.
Completely too hard.
Start with.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that mental model is like, these are 2 businesses. And I think what's good about that is when you've got a product business, you've got to answer the question, where is the runway coming from?
Yes. Using the business.
And if that's the case, you've got to formalize it. Right? Like this services business is going to give this business $100,000. And when it runs out of that, it's going to give it another 100,000. And it's like, it's a wording thing. Like it's a mindset thing, but not just we're doing 2 things and one's kind of lynching on the other.
That's interesting, because that's what I did actually. I set up a loan account between these 2 companies, because this other one, it's got to a point where maybe it can fund 2 weeks of costs, but not 4. So what happens is it has to get topped up. So I'm keeping track of this and going, you owe me, this business owes me their money. And so when you go, well, hang on a minute, this business needs to perform. How do we get this up? Start asking questions. And I think that's the thing, is that you formalize an arrangement with yourself. Ultimately, it's only just me just transferring money between 2 accounts, but it's not without strings attached. All right.
Well, and people, I think I find this with creating dashboards for people, like data dashboards, is that it's uncomfortable, right? Like looking at a product business that has spent, I don't know what it is, but say you've spent $50,000 and haven't made a single dollar from your product. Yes. That feels bad.
Yes.
And so when you see it in those terms, it makes you ask the question, would I put like that's $50,000 I could have spent on a holiday? Do I want to put in another $20,000?
Good money after
to see how it goes.
Is it good money?
Like there was this great research that I saw when I was working with a financial institution, and they found that when people didn't have money in their bank account, they stopped opening up the app. right? So the app, they'd open up the app on their phone, and the first thing it showed you was that like how much money you had.
Yep.
People would stop opening the app, which would create all of these downstream problems because they weren't facing it. They made this really simple change. They made the first screen just a list of things that you might want to do, and they put your current balance behind a screen, and people would actually come to the app and do different things in it because they didn't feel like the first thing they were going to have to do was
how much money they don't have.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's interesting. I read something the other one. I think it's the same principle in your business. If you want to lose weight, weigh yourself every day.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you look at the same things every day and they're not changing, then you know straight away, that you've got a problem to deal with, and it's reinforcing that problem all the time that you've got to deal with it. Obviously, then you've got to actually do it. But at least if nothing else, it's telling you, reminding you that it's important, because I think that's part of the problem. Is I say to a lot of people, oh, you don't have time to do this. I said, no, it's not about time. It's about whether it was important or not. Because I bet you did stuff during the day that was not that important, but you wanted to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary bit, is trying to figure out, what's important, what's not, and focus on it. But at the same time, reinforcing that. So the same with that. That company has its own bank account, its own balances. You can see what's going on out of the gate. I can't hide that in the existing business. I can't hide it. Well, because I could. It's just a line on the balance sheet now in the other business. But there you can't hide it. The bank account tells you that you've got a problem to deal with.
Yeah. And look, when someone's coming in to buy your business, often investors aren't necessarily that scared of businesses that aren't making money yet. What they are scared of is looking at a business that they don't understand and not knowing what the moving parts are. Like if you're like, great, we've got the services business, it makes this amount of money in this way, then we take that profit, we invest it over here, and our business plan says that we'll be profitable in 12 months because of XYZ. That's something people will put money in. We do a services business with a product on the side, and the product doesn't have any customers, but it will. No one's putting money into that.
Yeah, exactly. And so probably give me like 3 kind of best pieces of advice you give to someone who potentially wants to create a business for sale, because ultimately that's what you're trying to do there. Essentially, is the game is to build that business, fix that business up, whatever, or start that business from scratch properly, and then prepare it for sale. What's the 3 things that best pieces of advice you give someone that like free advice is worth every cent, right?
Yeah, that's right. Top 3. I don't know. I'll tell you the 3 that come to mind now. Yeah. Look, the analogy that I like to use when I think about business is comparing it back to a house that you're trying to sell. Like you're creating this thing, and I think if you wanted to sell your business or you want to create an asset, the first thing you need to do is finish building it. Which feels like a stupid thing to say in terms of a business. I think people think of running a business rather than building a business. Yeah. But if you had a house and you're like, oh, I haven't quite finished building the kitchen yet, and so I know when I want to cook eggs that I got to
do it in the backyard.
Yeah, 100%, right? Or like, the bathroom is still a water loop.
Yeah.
You wouldn't sell a house like that, or you'd accept a pretty low price for it.
Yeah, you'd be
whereas. Yeah. So like finish building your business. So make sure you've got a process around ops, finance, HR, how you deliver your product and service. Like just have those base things in place before trying to do too much else. So I think that would be my first piece of advice, is just ask yourself the hard question around what does a stable business look like? What's a finished business look like? I think number 2 is that you need a business plan with 3-year projections in it. When people look to sell a business, it feels like a waste of time, I think, creating projections, because you're like, oh, someone's going to buy it. Just a wish They're going to come up with their own plan.
Yeah, most projections are wish list, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like they're, it's like it's a way of articulating a possibility rather than saying that these things are set in stone. But if you don't have a business plan that's got projections in it when you're going to sell, you're going to force to be sell it for like the asset price of the business or like a multiple of revenue. Whereas when you've got a business plan, you've got a much better chance of getting someone to fall in love with the business, and then they'll pay more because they want it strategically, right? Yeah, that's right. Where am I at? I think that's 2.
Yeah. No pressure.
No pressure. Look, I think the 3rd one we've spoken about a lot, but you've got to make a business that where you could take a month to 2 month holiday, and realistically, it would be fine. which is scary for people. But yeah, if you could take a 2 to 3 month holiday without too much notice, then your business is in a good position to be able to sell it.
I think the trick to that is just keep taking time off. So you take 1 day a week off, so you cut back to 4 days a week, get less done, get more done in 4 days, and then sort of slowly cut it back. The guy once said to me once, and it's interesting, the question he asks himself every morning is, how can I work less days and make more money? Most people ask the opposite when they wake up. How can I work harder to make more money? Now, how can I work less and make more money? And sometimes it's just increasing your prices at the end of the day, right? It's a case of going, well, if I increase the price, I actually can work as long hours, and I think most businesses undervalue their price anyway. So
I totally agree. Actually, it reminds me, there's this really good study that just finished up that was run by, I forget whether it's like the Institute of or Foundation for, but whatever. It's the Foundation for Working 4 Days a Week, ran out of the UK, and they just did a global, you might have heard about it, a global experiment. There's a big
push lately of, for post-pandemic stuff, that people are working less hours.
And they just finished it. I think it was like a 6-month trial. People work 4 days a week instead of 5. They got their full 5-day-a-week wage for working the 4 days, and more work got done. The companies made more profit, and people enjoy working there more. Just because, like, if you've got 5 days, you fill 5 days worth of work, and that extra day is probably not high value work. No. Whereas if you set this artificial
done at work, to be honest, I don't think very little work gets done at work. When I had the 23 staff, I estimated that most they worked about 3 hours a day. 4 if lucky. And so, it's scary, but you think about it too, or you're just dragging it out. I'd take 4 good hours over 4 good hours.
Crappy hours any day.
Press that into 2 days a week and let them go for the week. So tell me how people can get in touch with you and what they can, and who you're looking for, I guess, as a potential client.
So to find us, we're impactpositive.co. So not .com, we're impactpositive.co. And you can find us Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you like to find stuff. And what I'd say is we've actually built a platform that can help do this for people. It's called Impact Builder. And so if you go to our website, sign up to Impact Builder. For the rest of the year, it's free for people to use and sign up. And that helps you create standard operating procedures. It helps you set your company vision. It helps you set kind of key metrics. So it's kind of like a nice one place to kind of turn your business into an asset, if you will.
Cool. Sounds good. I'm going to have a look later.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your time. And I think we had some really good, robust conversations, and I hope that someone gets something out of this in terms of, I think if you just want to get one good idea out of something, I think it's worth it. And so I think it's really cool. So really appreciate you coming on, and maybe we'll talk again when your business is going a bit older and what's going on with it. So really appreciate you coming on the show. Yeah,
fantastic. It was great to have a chat. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on another awesome episode for the Startup Secrets Show for entrepreneurs. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we'd be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at startupsecrets.show right now. Until next time, if you're an entrepreneur, make a start on your next great business idea today.